a series of polling catastrophes this week for Joe Biden, whether it's the New York Times or CBS. Donald Trump holding a solid lead over the incumbent president of the United States. Biden is a bit angry about the comparisons here, and he's been insisting that the polls are wrong. He said the media is not covering all of the polls. There were 5 polls recently. He claimed today, he was yelling at reporters, there were 5 polls that said he's in the lead. I'm not sure what he's talking about. I think he just made that up entirely. The man who follows the polls is our next guest, Tom Bevan. He's a co-founder and president of Real Clear Politics, the excellent news site, and he joins us now. Tom, good to have you with us.
Great to be back.
So am I right? The polling is not looking great for Joe right now.
It is not. There was a poll, Morning Consult came out this morning showing Biden up 1 point on Trump in a general election matchup. And there was a poll that came out yesterday that had him up 1. But those are the only 2 polls. I mean, all the polls that came out over the weekend, you mentioned New York Times Siena. There was a Fox News poll. There was a Wall Street Journal poll and some others. All showed Trump with the lead. So, I mean, we currently have, I think, 11 polls in our Real Clear Politics average, and Biden leads in 3 of them.
Yeah.
And 1 of them is tied, and the other 7 are Trump leading, and he leads in the average by 2 percentage points. So I don't know where Joe's getting his five straight polls. I'm not sure. We're going to ask, and we he's done this before. He did this a few months ago, where he said the same in advance of the 2022 elections. And we asked him, our White House reporter Phil Wegman asked the administration to supply the polls that he was talking about. They didn't do that, and they won't be able to do it this time because they simply don't exist.
Yeah, by the way, here's the audio of what I'm referencing. Here's a reporter asking him, what's your message to Democrats who are concerned about your poll numbers?
Mr. President, what's your message to Democrats who are concerned about your poll numbers?
My poll numbers, the last 5 polls you guys don't report, I'm winning 5 in a row. You guys only look at the New York Times. They're a great paper.
They're a great paper. You only look at the New York Times. That Times survey did actually have a lot of warning signs in it for Biden, including the fact that there are 2020 Biden voters, 10% of them, who are now saying they're prepared to vote for Trump. That seems like a big deal.
That's a big deal. Obviously, a majority of Democrats say that Biden is too old to be president, which is it's like when you add in Republicans and independents, it was like 73% or something. So that was significant. I think the most significant number out of that poll was the New York Times asked a question, have Biden's policies helped you or hurt you or not made a difference? And among independent voters, there was like 44% of independent voters said Biden's policies had hurt them. Only 13% said Biden's policies had helped them. And Trump actually they asked the same question about Trump, and he had about an 11-point advantage. People thought his policies helped, not hurt. Mm-hmm. So you combine those 2 things, and that's like a 40-point gap between just among independent voters. And again, it's a small slice of the electorate in a really divided country, but in some of these swing states, they're going to be crucial. And so to me, that's a huge thing, because, we can talk about his age, we can talk about, Trump's temperament or whatever, but when it gets right down to, does this president's policies help you or hurt you? Biden is way, way underwater with independent voters.
What issue is dominating now? Sometimes it's the economy and inflation, but I've noticed in some surveys, immigration and the border have risen to number 1. What's the big thing at this moment?
Yeah, it's still pretty much the economy, but you're right. I mean, I saw that the other day, too, that immigration was at the top. And, a lot of that is driven by events, Laken Riley's murder in Georgia, and a lot of what's been, Trump and Biden both being at the border. So that probably helped propel immigration to the top spot. But it's typically an issue that Republican voters care an awful lot about, and Democrats really don't care much at all. And climate change, vice versa. And Democrats care an awful lot about that. Republicans don't really care. But overall, I mean, the economy, inflation, prices, still the consensus number 1 issue across the board for the majority of voters that are voting this year.
So what does Biden do this week, for instance, in the State of the Union? He's got a big opportunity Thursday. He's going to address the nation. How is he going to use that, and how does he address these concerns?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think the when you look at the administration, you look at his advisors, they're trying to, battle this perception that he's just not up to the job. I mean, so the minimum bar that he has to clear is just not to look old and frail and misspeak and mispronounce and forget things or whatever. And I mean, that's kind of where the bar is, unfortunately. But because that's a huge drag on him, is this idea that he's not up for the job. But as far as it being able to move the needle on any of these issues, State of the Union addresses don't really do that. I mean, they might give him a very temporary bump, but overall, it's not going to nothing he's going to be able to say on Thursday night is really going to change the dynamic of this race in any significant way.
Mm-hmm. There's some reporting this week that Biden is really he's not going to run on issues. In fact, he's going to run principally on attacking Trump again and making this all a big referendum on, say, January 6th of 2021 all over again.
Yeah.
Axios has a report this morning that Biden is pushing for a new campaign strategy, he says, designed to draw out President Donald Trump. They want him to go, quote, haywire in public. So I guess the plan is that Biden wants to attack Trump until Trump attacks Biden enough that voters don't like Trump. Is that what we're going to see for the rest of this campaign?
Yeah, I mean, so part of this was the New Yorker interview that came out on Monday. One of his campaign officials said, look, we're going to make this all about January 6th, all about threats to democracy, and that's going to really come into focus the last few weeks of the election. And obviously that's something that's part of the playbook that Democrats ran in 2022 and had some success with. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. But I mean, I just don't know that that's enough to have a strategy just to simply scare the daylights out of all of your voters and independent voters, and without having any sort of forward-looking vision or running on any of your accomplishments or policies. Typically that doesn't go well, but that seems to be where they're headed. And you're right, this idea that he's going to, Biden wants to troll Trump and just basically kind of dig at him in public and make him, lash out, and somehow that's going to change the dynamic of the race, I think is just foolishness. I mean, people already know Trump lashes out. He'll lash out. He does it all the time. It's not going to be anything new. It's not going to be anything that voters haven't already digested as part of the calculus when they look at these two candidates, their strengths and weaknesses, and make their decision about who they're going to vote for.
Yeah. Yeah. Meanwhile, Biden is obviously watching really closely the polling data that you and I are talking about, specifically on some of the various demographics. Among them, the young demographic, which is increasingly headed in Trump's direction, it seems, and then also especially black voters. A lot of concern that there is some slipping for Democrats in that some black voters are moving towards Donald Trump. The big concern they have is turnout at all, getting people to turn out to vote for Biden. And in fact, Joe Biden was on a North Carolina radio show today. North Carolina, one of the states in Super Tuesday. The show is called Afternoon Vibes with Ms. Jessica, and Biden was trying to scare that audience into believing that that voter ID laws are designed to hurt black voters. Here's the audio.
Well, I think what's at stake for everyone, and particularly the black voters, is that our very democracy is at stake. When I ran in 2020, and the black community was really significant in my winning in the first place. When I ran in 2020, I said democracy is at stake, and the press said, oh, wait a minute, that's an exaggeration. Except the vast majority of people understood what I meant. For example, making it harder to vote. What do you need to vote? An ID card to be able to go vote, a photograph. This is a once-in-a-generation for us to be able to stand up and take on the extreme division and violence that the MAGA Republicans are pushing.
Extreme division and violence being pushed by MAGA Republicans. Also, you hear Biden there clinging to an ongoing and disproven conspiracy theory that voter ID suppresses black votes, Tom.
Right, and African-American turnout in Georgia, for example, in 2020 was like through the roof and at historic highs. And that was one of the states that they had said, Republicans were working to suppress the black vote. So it just doesn't really pass the smell test. And that's not to say that, they're not going to continue to try and do that. But it just, again, I'm not sure that in and of itself is going to be enough to win an election, but also, to your point, stem the tide of voters. And because a lot of this is it's not racially based, it's more class based. So it's voters who don't have college degrees. And, those are white voters, have been, but also now black voters and Hispanic voters who look at Biden's policies, they look at inflation, they're struggling to get by, they can't afford housing, they can't afford, cars and going to the grocery store, whatever.
Yes.
And they look at Trump's policies and they feel better about how things were before Biden got elected. And so that's not something that's going to change just by making these appeals to sort of racial politics, because it's not as much about race now as it is about class and about economics.
That's what a fascinating observation. So for voters, they're observing this through the lens of class, whereas it seems like Biden and the Biden campaign are viewing it through the lens of race, at least in the clip we just played. And another expression of that is the recent discovery, the announcement that the Teamsters have given a donation to the Republican Party, perhaps as a way to sort of, to like saber rattle a little bit and demonstrate to the Democrats that vote could disappear from them. And you're also watching as auto workers, for instance, in Michigan are very disenchanted by the chaos that's been wrought upon them by the Biden administration and are much more likely to support Trump now. So this is happening all across the country, Tom.
It is. And I mean, Michigan is significant. Obviously, you've got the Palestinian American, constituency in Dearborn who voted for uncommitted. That's a problem for Joe Biden. There's no question. But also this, you mentioned union workers. I mean, the unions and the auto workers endorsed Joe Biden, but significant portions of their membership support Trump. And this EV issue has been a real problem for the Biden administration. That's why they walked it back. And I just can't overstate how important Michigan is to Biden and his path. I mean,
yes.
If he does not win Michigan, he's got to replace those 16 electoral votes somewhere else, and his path narrows pretty significantly. If you go look across the battleground states right now, I mean, he wouldn't win anywhere else. I mean, it would be a real wipeout. He'd lose all of the big 6 or big 7 battleground states if the election were held today, if the polling's accurate. And Michigan is a big part of that. And so I think he's got a lot of work to do in the upper Midwest, and Michigan in particular.
Tom Bevan, one more question for you on the polling. I have noticed in a number of surveys that voters indicate that if Donald Trump is to be convicted, that may actually affect their vote, that they may not vote for him under those circumstances. How dependent is the Biden campaign on a criminal prosecution or a criminal conviction of Donald Trump?
That is a good question. First of all, I don't buy that premise. I mean, there is, that seems to be the conventional wisdom, but I honestly, if you look at certainly Republican voters, but even some independents, already view a lot of the charges against Trump as being political in nature. And so I'm not sure that they're going to view a conviction on those charges as anything other than political in nature.
Right.
So I don't necessarily buy the premise that somehow, you take any one of these 91 charges and Trump's convicted of them and suddenly that changes the entire dynamic of this election. I may be wrong, but that's just my gut feeling on this. And I do think the Biden campaign that has been part of their strategy, that would be part of the equation that would help them to victory in 2024. And thus far, I mean, it's simply not working. I mean, the whole lawfare, all of these charges, I mean, Trump has only gotten stronger over the last few weeks, and this stuff has been in the news every single day, and it simply hasn't weakened him. In fact, it's helped him in a lot of instances, galvanizing people who are, Republicans who are maybe not huge Trump supporters, but feel
yes.
like he's getting, the shaft or getting, persecuted, not prosecuted. So, if that is their hope, if that is their plan, they better have a plan B because it's not working out so well right now.
There was reporting to this effect that the White House is angry. Biden himself has been angry that Garland didn't move faster in prosecuting Trump in order to gain a conviction ahead of the election. That detail was leaked to Politico in February last month, which is another way of saying that the White House is placing public pressure on the Justice Department to hurry the hell up already. So they very clearly desire this outcome, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is part of their calculus. But again, like I said, if that's their only plan, they better have a backup because
Right.
it's not working so far.
Yeah. All right, Tom, as always, thank you for your insights. Really appreciate that and your excellent website, Real Clear Politics. Nice to talk to you today, sir.